Hey everybody, it is time for another behind the scenes update. I want to give you a little look at what we're doing to get things ready for the season. The last 3 weeks have been all about planting. So everything we did really revolved around planting and putting the plants away and getting them in good shape. But now that we've got all the planting done, we can concentrate on a lot of other things. So first thing on the list was a lot of just cleanup and organizing. Things get completely chaotic while we're planting, and so things end up everywhere. And so the staff has been doing a really good job of getting things organized, putting things where they belong, and even things like this area behind me here. Last week, one of our employees, Paisley, went through and she cleared everything off, and then she scrubbed those things down and got them looking pretty good, but the paint job was done years and years and years ago. So there's a lot of discoloration, and there was kind of these weird kind of gray marks in there. It just did not look good. And she had done all that work, and no matter how hard she scrubbed, there was no hope of getting it off. So I just had to paint it. And you've heard the phrase slap on a coat of paint. Well, that's exactly what I did. I've never tried to work as fast as I have with a paint job as I did with this one. I did not want it to become a big job. I said, look, I can't spend more than 2 hours on this. So I got in there and I did two things to make sure that I kept within my time. Number one, before I started anything, no brushes came out until I made sure I had enough paint for the whole project, because there's nothing worse than starting a paint project and you run out of paint halfway through, and then you've got to find more paint and will it match and all that stuff. It's just always a nightmare. So I wanted to make sure that. And then I also wanted to watch out for what I call the curse of the brush, because what happens when you start a paint project, and I'm sure this has happened to some of you, you paint one section and then it's next to another section. You're like, oh, that looks so bad. I got to do this one here. And oh, if I do that, I got to do the trim around the window. And if I do the trim around the window, I've got to do this part over here. And then there's this section down here. And suddenly your little paint job, it just blows up into something huge. I didn't want that. So I made sure and I really assessed exactly what I was going to paint. And in the end, it took me 2 hours and 15 minutes to do it all. Now, I will admit I have a little bit of scraping to do. I didn't get all that done. Like this one, that comes off really easy though. That's good news. Anyway, so I have just a little bit more of that to do. So I was pretty sloppy with it, but that's nothing. So I'm happy to have that done. It looks so much better. Our staff's also been working on getting more product on the shelves. The new stuff has come in, and so they're getting that all priced. Super thrilled with how they're doing that. They still have more to go, but it's nice to see the progress and seeing, okay, we do have full shelves. We're going to be fully stocked. So that's good news. And one of the things that we got this year, though, I really like it. We got these little canisters of seeds, and they're very, very nice. I think the packaging is really beautiful. And like this one here, these are all Michigan native flowers and plants, so it's just a nice little, could be a nice gift or just a good grab and go item. If you wanted to have some seeds planted out, have like maybe a little field or a little flower patch that you want to do. And then there's some other ones, like this one is for hummingbirds, this one's for bees, ladybugs, butterflies. So just nice themed, little easy to use type thing. So I really like this. I think this is a nice addition, and hopefully people like it too. The other thing we're working on is new signage. So we're trying to get a lot of signs for a lot of the different plants and different information out there that are going to really help the customer, give them a little bit of education, and also give them what they need to know just right there in front of them, so that you don't have to try to search the plant tags and stuff, because plant tags are so inconsistent from tag to tag, and it can be just hard to find the information that you need on those tags. So hopefully by having consistent signage across a lot of these different varieties, it's going to make it easier for people, but it's quite an investment. There's a lot of different ways to do signage. So, handwritten signs are one way, but that can be pretty time consuming. They can look a little unprofessional. We've been just printing and laminating signs for years, but this year we're up in our game quite a bit. We invested in kind of a new system, I'll call it, but really it's just parts that we're assembling together. So we got these things here, which are these plant stakes, and the whole thing, it's pricey, but we did get really nice stakes to use, because a lot of these are going to be going outdoors. And I tried looking at some that were, really inexpensive, but they were so thin, they were not going to hold up. Or if they did hold up, I was worried they were going to really beat up this area, because they were going to flop around a lot in the wind, and we need that sturdiness. So I got these from a company called Parker Davis. So it's an American-made product, and it is really durable. I'm hoping they last a really long time. We did have to invest then in a laser printer and more toner for that. Plus, this is waterproof paper. Hopefully these hold up really well. I don't know how long before they start to show wear and how long before they start to fade. I hope we get through the full season. It'd be really great if we could use these more than one season. We'll wait and see. But as long as we get one season out of the printed part, that's great, because we can always put the new tags over this. But it's, you know, it was all in all, for all the parts that we need this, and this is for our signage for the whole season, there's $2,500 at least invested in this. Now, a lot of that's the initial stuff, the printer and the stakes. The stakes are really expensive. The freight on these, because I mean, we had a couple thousand of them, and it was really heavy. So shipping those out ended up, they actually called us and said, hey, just so you know, based on where you're located, freight's a lot more than we were expecting. And I appreciated them giving the call. We needed them anyway. We weren't going to be able to drive down and pick them up. So these, I think, are going to really be helpful. I'm pretty happy with them. The staff is super excited too, because a lot of times it helps to be able to have the reference material right there in front of you, because a lot of times we know stuff, but we can't recall it fast enough. So by having a sign there, we can be like, yes, that's the one that's, you know, for shade or deer resistant and that type of thing. And those are the questions that we get the most. What's deer resistant? And I think having those at a glance is going to be very helpful. So we put a lot of energy, time, and money into this, but I think that investment is going to pay off, especially for the customer experience. I think it's going to make a big difference. So this was quite an achievement for us. Hopefully it all works out and we have everything figured out. The other project we've been working on is some of our benches. So our benches are all wood with kind of a grid work on top, and some of them were done over 20 years ago. And so there's a lot of sagging going on. We've been kind of touching them up and doing the best we can with them, but some of them really needed new tops put on. So my dad and my nephew are working on that right now, and it's so much nicer because when the benches start to sag, it means that, number one, the pots or the trays are always kind of cockeyed, and that can be a lot harder for watering, a lot more runoff, so that's a problem. But also, it's funny how when a pot is kind of tilted even a little bit, the amount of surface area it takes up on a bench really does change. So this is going to be more efficient, and also it just looks bad when you got these wobber jabby kind of layers all over the place. So that's good. That's normally a project we would have done probably in February. It's more of a winter project, but the weather was so good in February that we put it off because we were doing stuff outside, and now we're in March doing our cold weather stuff. It's completely backwards this year, but it's working out pretty well. So we're glad to have that kind of underway, but it is kind of holding us up for a couple things. So Greenhouse 7, we were going to start planting the perennials. There's about 1,000 perennials that need to be planted in there, and we were going to have that all done starting Monday, or we're going to have it done this week, but those benches are being done now, so we pushed off the transplanting, and we'll start that tomorrow. And once they get those up, then, you know, the benches will be done, the planting will be done, and it all works out. So those plants were fine for another couple days, so I guess 2 days behind schedule on planting isn't that big a deal, but normally those benches would have been done in the winter time. We did start planting some of the containers that customers have dropped off, or some of the municipalities have dropped off. So we can only start a couple of them because we need at least a week from the time that we plant out the plants into the pots for them to get big enough that they can safely be transplanted. Some of them take even 2 weeks or maybe a little longer. So by next week we'll be able to go full steam into that. But right now we're just picking and choosing the ones that we know have plants that we'll be able to use at this point. So we got a couple of them started, and like next week it's going to just be planting all kinds of stuff again, but those will be in containers rather than in the individual pots. We have done a trim on a lot of our petunias, and normally we try to avoid that. We try to get them into the colder greenhouse sooner than we have, but the schedule hasn't allocated for that. And then we have certain petunias that just are a little farther behind, and there's just certain ones that are just taking off like crazy. So we're making sure and giving those a little bit of a trim, and they will be moving out probably by the end of the week or early next week into the cooler greenhouse. That one stays around 40 degrees at night. And during the daytime, we try to keep it as close to 40 as possible, but there'll be some days when the sun's out and it's going to be a lot warmer in there. But as long as we keep them cool at night especially, they tend to slow down as far as growing, so then we don't have to worry about trimming. But they also tend to produce more branches, so they, instead of flowering, they get more of these kind of growth nodes coming out, and they become fuller. And so there's a win-win there. So we don't have to trim, and the plants are going to be fuller with more flowers. So it's kind of an unusual thing, especially with the petunias. We also put calibrachoa in there. Sometimes there's salvia or geraniums will end up, because they can all handle relatively cold temperatures. As long as it doesn't get too close to freezing, they're going to be fine. And that slowdown really does help us out. So we're working on that. A lot of flowers are starting to show, so we're getting a lot of first blooms on the plants, and this is always a little bit of a stressful time because there's plants like petunias that sometimes that first flower doesn't look true to what the flowers will be like later on in the season, and it can drive you crazy because we had some red ones open and they were like striped red. They did not look good, and we thought, oh no, because every once in a while there's like a bad batch. It doesn't happen that often to us, but it has happened. So anytime we see any like variation that isn't supposed to be there, we're like, oh, not again. But these are doing fine. The first couple flowers have that kind of unique look to them, and then the next ones that come up just look great. So it isn't that big a deal. But there's always that bit of an anxiety until we see that next flush of flowers show up. So that's how that works. And just, it's been nice seeing all the different colors and the new varieties. It's really, it's the best time to be in the greenhouse when the weather isn't great outside. Just coming in here and seeing flowers is just, it's such a welcome kind of distraction for everybody. And you might not realize that a lot of our hanging baskets and our porch pots that we planted up, we need to rotate those because of their placement. So like the porch pots we have along the benches on the floor, and so one side is going to get more sunlight than the other, and if we don't turn them, we're going to have one beautiful bushy flowering side and then one side that just looks really sad. So once a week the ones on the floor get rotated, so that's kind of it's a quick job, but it's still a big enough job. And then the hanging baskets, we rotate those not quite as often because they get a lot more light, but because our greenhouses are oriented kind of east and west, there is always that side sometimes can be a problem as far as not getting quite as much light. So we just rotate them. We have our different techniques to get them to go. So like a lot of times if I can reach, I'll just reach up at the top and flip them each one at a time. I know like my sister, when she can't reach, she turns the pot first and then she just kind of lifts it up and it springs off the pole, and then she pulls it back down and it hooks back on. And I've seen other staff do, you know, other little tricks, anything kind of keep it efficient and keep it going and use less muscles, because when you're doing hanging baskets high up like that, you were muscles that you didn't even know you had. So it's an interesting job because you think you've been getting a workout and then suddenly you're doing that, and completely different story. And the other big job that we've been working on is our online store, because we open for pre-orders on April 1st, where our local customers can order online their different annuals and some of their combo container baskets and things like that. So they can go online, pre-order, and we take care of it for a certain amount of time, and then they come pick it up. And this system has worked really well for us, but in the end, we have almost 400 plants that we have to get online, make sure the descriptions are current, get photos for them. There's lots of new plants in there as well. So that kind of adds up. It definitely adds up to a lot of hours, but it's a way for us to be able to offer that service to our customers. And it also, they prepay, so it also gets money in right now while our suppliers are kind of beating down the door for paying the invoices. Now, a lot of our suppliers, we have terms until say June or July or something like that, but there's a lot of other ones that it's basically we got to pay on delivery or shortly thereafter. So it's good to have that cash flow right now. It just takes a lot of pressure off, I guess is what I'd say. But our online store is also unique because we have a lot of customization on baskets and like porch pots, so people can, you know, choose different flowers and different containers. It's just, you know, a service that we offer that is just a little bit different, and it does require a lot of work on the front end and then some coordination on the back end after the order comes in to make sure it all gets planted. We've got it down. We've been doing it since 2020 and it works for us. So I'm really lucky that we have a crew that gets it and they're able to get things done, and the system is working so far, and we keep improving it every year. And this year hopefully goes as well as last year, because we didn't really have any major problems with our stuff that we had that we had to set aside for pre-orders. So I'm really grateful for all that. Otherwise, I mean, it's just been a whirlwind. It's been fantastic. I'll keep you guys posted on everything else that's going on. Thank you again for all the comments. You guys left a lot of comments on the seeds. I kind of have figured a couple things out that I had done wrong. So it's good to know that what I did, and you guys helped me with that. So anytime you guys are thinking of something, leave a comment. I appreciate it so much. And I will see you guys all very soon.